Good afternoon, YouTube. This is the Oracle coming in for another edition of my experiences as a Jehovah Witness. For those of you who have not heard my other videos, I'd like to do a quick introduction. I'm a third generation Jehovah Witness. I have been out of the religion for 25 years. I consider it to be a cult. Um, I'm fairly educated. I have written about a lot of issues in society. The reason why I am anonymous is because of my career. I don't work in journalism per se anymore, but I do have a high profile position, and because of that, I cannot show my face. It has nothing at all to do with my family finding out that I'm an apostate, even though I don't particularly believe in that label, because basically I'm exercising my free right to discuss my experiences as a Jehovah Witness and discuss the many situations that I've encountered leaving this cult. I thought today I would do something a little bit different from my first videos and just talk about a few situations that have happened to me. So today my video is entitled 10 Regrets Being a Jehovah Witness. I thought I would go through some things that I experienced that I look back on and wish I could have done differently. I can honestly say I'm not someone that truly has regrets, because I look at things that have happened in my life that I could have done differently as lessons. However, knowing what I know now, there are some things that I'd like to share. Also, for those of you who have not heard my other videos, I do have a huge background also in social science and psychology and philosophy. My goal with my channel is not so much to go through the facts in terms of going through the literature, going through the sermons, going through what's on JW.org. I mean, I reference those things because I've done a lot of research on the JW cult. I have studied world religion, but my goal was to talk about it from a humanistic point of view and to talk about it from a philosophical point of view. What I wanted to do in my videos is talk about the process that it took for me to leave and some of the things that I experienced, because I totally think that it helps for people to share what they went through and how they overcame it and some of the hardships that they experienced, and in this one, regrets, and how I was able to make peace with those regrets. So without further ado, number 10, birthdays. I never understood why I could not celebrate birthdays. I had such an issue with that growing up because I never read a scripture that said, "Thou shalt not celebrate birthdays." I think that this is one of the rules that the Jehovah Witness cult implements to show that they are different from the rest of the world. There is nothing in the scriptures, nothing anywhere in any scripture that says that you should not celebrate a birthday. This is an example of something where they took one isolated situation where something negative happened and made the connection to say, well, every time that there have been an incident of a birthday in the Bible, it's been negative. So therefore, we think that you should not celebrate birthdays. It absolutely makes no sense. All the disciples, all the prophets, all the people that were in the Bible actually celebrated birthdays. And let me tell you, when you face Jehovah, he's not going to look at you and say, "Hey, did you celebrate a birthday?" Because if you did, you're not going to be able to live forever. Again, I celebrate birthdays. There's nothing wrong with celebrating a birthday. And the only place that you'll read that there is something wrong with celebrating a birthday is in their publications. So it's their interpretation of the scripture. and it's not an accurate interpretation. So again, there is a distinction between the Bible and what's in the Bible and what the society has interpreted as correct or incorrect. And I'll talk about some of the other things that I realized about their flip-flops in a later video, but don't feel that there's anything wrong with celebrating your birthday. And that was my biggest regret, one of my biggest regrets, that I never celebrated a birthday. So the next year that I was done with this cult, I had a great big birthday party and I had a big cake and it was wonderful. Moving on. One of the things that I have discussed, not as much as I'd like to, is the snitching culture in the JW cult. It's an unhealthy environment. It's not good for people. There are people that unfortunately get a sense of validation by being able to get people in trouble. So the snitching culture in the Jehovah Witness religion is very, very harmful, and it makes people walk around on eggshells, but it also gives people that may in society have an inferiority complex a false sense of superiority. So my number 9 regret is snitching on some childhood friends that my brother and I grew up with. So a little bit of the background on this one is that my brother and I, we had a lot of family friends, but one of my father's closest friends was a family that had 4 sons. They had 2 sons that were fairly older, and then they had 2 sons that were about my brother and I's age. And I had a huge crush on the youngest son. I lived back and forth between my parents. I used to visit my father every weekend. But then when I was about 13 and 14 or 12 or 13, I lived with my father. And so when I lived with my father for those 2 years, I was able to attend school with these two young guys that were in the Kingdom Hall where my father lived, and we had already known them for years, for many years. But when we went to school with them and we called the school bus that they did, that's when I started to see that they were actually doing a lot of inappropriate things with females. That they'd be doing a lot of kissing, a lot of all kind of stuff. So I was jealous. It had nothing really to do with being a JW or being a publisher. I was just jealous because I had a crush on him. But my brother came home one day and showed me the school newspaper, and there was actually a picture of one of the brothers with a female, and they had, like a Valentine picture, blah, blah, blah. So we decided that we were going to go to the brothers, and we were going to tell the brothers that they were publishers, and they actually used to carry the mic. They used to, I don't know if they still do that. Again, I've been out of the religion for 25 years, but when I went, used to study the Watchtower, and during that, people would raise their hand, and then you would have someone that passed the mics. And passing the mic was a great experience and position that somebody could have if they were a publisher in good standing. So these 2 young men actually had that position, but they had like a serious double life. They were doing whatever they wanted, drinking, having sex, dating all the girls, quote unquote worldly girls. So we went and we told the brothers, and I never forget that. I felt kind of guilty even at the time. Like, I remember just not feeling good about it, but we did it. And they actually had a judicial hearing. They got in big trouble for this, and they were actually kicked out of their parents' house because they found out that there was a lot more to what their sons were doing than what they realized, and they actually kicked them both out of the house. And it was something that I always remember because that was a spiral downward for these two guys. They eventually came and lived back with their parents, but before that time, their parents actually had no idea what their sons were involved in. They really thought that they were these straight up, just young men that were going out in field service and participating in the Kingdom Hall and just nice ministers. But then after my brother and I snitched on them, they actually found out that their sons were involved in all kind of things, and it was a downward spiral. So we kept in contact with the family. I don't think they ever knew that it was my brother and I, but it was something that I felt terrible about. So as time went on, because of that whole situation, they had a lot of trouble in their family. And long story short is both sons had some terrible things happen to them because of being in and out of their parents' house and not having their family support anymore because they just came out and said they didn't want to be witnesses. So one of the sons was in a terrible car accident, and he was um, basically just had a lot of issues from that. He's still living, but with assistant living. So he has a lot of issues. The other son killed himself, and not by suicide. It was a freak accident that happened, and I'm going to leave it at that because I want to kind of keep it somewhat anonymous what I'm saying. If I say exactly how this guy died, people that would know exactly who I'm talking about because it was a crazy freak accident. But I never forget, just the whole set of events of the snitching that we took part in. And I never did it after that because it was one of those things where I felt I don't agree with it. I didn't agree with what happened. I saw it. I saw the years that went by, all from us, going to the brothers. I saw when they were being pulled into meetings, and they were pulled into meetings like at every other week they were meeting with the brothers. And it's something that I made peace with it in myself, but I never agreed with it. And it was something that I wish I had never done. So that's number 9. Number 8 is one of my bigger ones, and that is being afraid of Armageddon. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you, the story of Armageddon never truly made sense for me. But as a young kid, coming to terms with there being this huge war that would destroy the earth as we know it, and the only people that were survived were Jehovah Witnesses, was terrible for me. It was a horrible, horrible set of events. And even as I remember going for my baptism and having to go through the questions, and I would try and understand conceptually how this was supposed to happen, and I would listen to the rationale and the explanation that they gave, and it never truly made sense to me, and it was a scary thing. I was like, even listening to everything that you're saying and how you're explaining it is not something that I really want to be a part of. And when I listen to some of the speeches that they give at the conventions, I'm like, they really ask you to detach logic and reason, and their explanation of Armageddon makes absolutely no sense. It's not anything to be afraid of because they don't know what they're talking about. Again, this entire interpretation of a destruction of the world and there only being Jehovah Witnesses that's going to survive is absolutely ridiculous. As I mentioned before, let's be clear. God is not a religion. Religion is man interpreting God. So God isn't going to look at one group of people that have a title and say, you know what, I'm going to keep these people only. God is not caught up in what man is caught up in. He's looking at hearts. He's not looking at titles of people. So all the stuff that people say because they're in the Watchtower track and Bible Society, they have taken what the scriptures have said and made it such an organized thing that is taken away from the very context of what the scriptures were all about in the first place. So being afraid of Armageddon, I should have never been afraid of Armageddon, because there is no such thing as an Armageddon. It never was, and it never will be. And that was something that I, wish that I had come to terms with. It's not so much a regret as it is an enlightenment for me. It's a freeing of myself. It's freeing of my mind. I realized that this Armageddon is a fear tactic. It's one of the cornerstones of this cult. It's how it keeps people caught up, because they scare you into believing that even if some of what they teach is wrong, that they still give you a guarantee of surviving Armageddon. And let me tell you, once you break free of that, and once you start thinking for yourself, and once you start asking logical questions, you don't have to run and read 15 million books. You can just take it letter by letter and think about it. Just think about it reasonably. It doesn't make sense. They have been falsely predicting Armageddon since inception. They have tried to tell their followers that they knew the date. They kept doing it, and they still haven't gotten it right. So again, I'm so glad that I stopped being afraid of Armageddon. And it's a regret that I ever was. Number 7, letting the society be the single source of information about other groups of people. This is a big one for me. And I was listening to John Cedar's channel. I like, there's so many. There's Kim and Mikey. There's The Fifth. There's Victoria Love. There's so many different. There's another young lady that reminds me of myself. Just so many channels out there that I really, really love. But I think one thing that I heard John Cedar say, and I'm going to take it a step further, is that why would you go to a car, and I'm using an analogy. So you go to a car dealership and you ask them, so let's just go with the BMW. So you go to a BMW dealership and you ask them to tell you about a Mercedes Benz. Do you actually think that you're going to get impartial, neutral information? So that's the thing. See, when I was young and I didn't know any better, I used to listen to everything that they said at the Kingdom Hall about the Catholic Church, about other religions, about other groups of people. I used to believe everything that they said. And, as I mentioned in my other videos, that one of the things that helped me was that I was in the library. I started reading outside of what they were saying, but I have a regret that I ever listened to anything that they said. Because, there's a lot of people, and again, that's one of the reasons they want uneducated people. Uneducated people are not taught to think critically and to think logically. They're not taught those basic things, and it's very easy to manipulate you. They say, don't go out into the terrible world. Don't listen to the Catholics. Don't listen to the Jews. Don't listen to the Muslims. Don't listen to the Seventh-day Adventists. Don't listen. Every other belief is wrong, and they're the ones that are going to tell you about it, so you don't have to waste your time researching it. And that's the problem. I'm not condemning and I'm not endorsing any of these groups. What I'm saying is that I implore any person to do research for themselves. Don't let anyone, that's even outside of the JW religion, don't let anyone tell you about something outside of themselves. Figure it out for yourself. Do the research for yourself. And again, I am a philosopher. Okay, and I study philosophy and I live it every day. So here's something that I'm going to share with you. Truth is like water. Truth doesn't change because of the environment that you're in. Water doesn't change because it's in a cup. It's still water. You can go outside and there'll be water on the ground. It doesn't change that it's outside and not in a cup. So it doesn't matter where you get it. It's still going to be what it is. That's the truth. Now that's the real truth. So if you are in something that is valid, it should be able to stand up to a little examination. So if you want to go sit in a church and you want to listen, if you want to research world religion outside of the Jehovah Witness religion, you should be able to do that without fear and manipulation that you're doing something wrong. There's nothing that's going to happen to you. Furthermore, all of the disciples, including Jesus from the Bible, talk to people from all different walks of life. That's what it's all about. And what they shared was a philosophy of living, a philosophy of life. It wasn't under the context of you are this or you are that. In fact, that's what he fought and taught against. So I can talk about this all day, but what I'm saying is don't let any group of people tell you about something. You find out for yourself. Jehovah Witness cult tries to fear people by saying that they have the only valid information. Okay, when I went out there and I got information for myself, I found out a lot of things that I was being lied to about. And I'm not saying that because I have an axe to grind against this religion. If they were saying something that was valid, I am a critical thinker. I'm actually a very logical person. And I can take truth in any realm. It doesn't matter to me. I would get on board if I really believed that it was valid. I have a very high profile position. I am doing a lot of things in this world. And guess what? I got that because I actually happen to be pretty smart. I have my dumb days like everybody else, but I actually go out there and I try to take it to the grain every day. And that's literally because I wasn't afraid to ask the questions and research. So with that being said, if I really felt that something was valid, I would be a part of it. No questions. And I'm telling you, when I realized how they were controlling people, how they were even controlling me, I woke up. So that's number 7. Number 5 is sort of a caveat. It's not really a caveat, but actually it goes along with number 7, number 6. Not asking enough questions. I regret that I didn't ask more questions. I remember when I was going for my baptismal studying to be baptized, and there were a lot of things that even when we were going through the teachings of the Jehovah Witnesses that I didn't quite understand, and I had asked some serious questions about it, but I was made to feel guilty, and I'm sure that there are other people out here that maybe can identify with what I'm saying. I was made to feel guilty about what I was asking questions about. And so I was like, you know what? I need to stop asking questions, because the person that I was studying with actually made me feel guilty and made me feel that my faith wasn't strong. And see, that's sort of something else I want to talk about. A lot of times I notice in religion that they want you to detach from reason and focus on faith. And all faith does is tell you to stop using reason and just trust in the imperfect explanation that you're getting. And I have a problem with that, because I like hard facts, and I like to be able to ask questions, because there's nothing wrong with asking questions. And again, if you look at even the scriptures or look at any other sacred text, It began with a question. It began with exploring things. It began with opening up your mind to the thinking that maybe something was more than what you thought it was. And so that begins with asking questions. So I really regret that I let them make me think that me wanting to know more than what was written in their publications was wrong. Number 5, participating in shunning. This is a serious regret for me because I don't agree with the shunning. I think it's an incorrect interpretation of the scriptures. I don't actually. I think that shunning is really about emotional manipulation, and it's about trying to make people feel guilty for not wanting to be a part of the organization. I also think that if you're trying to teach people a lesson, that shunning them really doesn't do that. It actually, and again, the way that they actually do shunning is that they do it haphazardly, and I've talked about many of the instances that I have seen people sin and not be disfellowshipped. I've seen people or not even get private or public reproof. I've also seen situations where involving two people that one person was disfellowshipped and the other one wasn't, and it was strictly because this is a misogynistic, sexist organization. And that was one of the reasons that I left, because they decided that because this person was a female, that this female had a higher amount of responsibility than the male did. So there was an instance I never forget where there was a person that was a good family friend, and they were disfellowshipped. At the time, I wasn't baptized, but I remember that I had seen them when I was going through the mall, and I ignored that person because that's what the people that I was with, they were all Jehovah Witness, did, and I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel it was natural. I didn't think it was normal. I think that people are imperfect and people sin and people make mistakes all the time, and people either get it or they don't. But it's not up to us to make them feel any worse than they probably already do. The other problem that I have with shunning is the fact that you have child molesters that have been disfellowshipped and then been reinstated, and you never take them to the authorities. So again, I mean, there are people, even my father, who has been disfellowshipped 4 times, and my father has beaten my mother, he's beaten my stepmother, he's had affairs with women in the Kingdom Hall. So it's like you have a shunning. You do the shunning because you're trying to manipulate people, but then the whole nature of why you're supposed to do it is hypocritical, and it still, you still have a dirty organization with people walking around that shouldn't be active members. If you're supposedly some Christian organization that has a clean organization, you shouldn't have these people in positions of authority. So I'm not going to go any further with it other than to say I'm just sorry that I ever participated in it. Number 4, not reporting the times that I saw people being abused. This is also something that I wanted to talk about because there were a few instances at the circuit conventions and the national conventions that I saw parents beating their children to just awfully. And I remember one time that this mother was beating the crap out of her child with a belt, to the point that there was another woman that actually came in and stopped her from doing it, and it was awful. And I remember there also being a situation where there was a woman, her husband was not baptized, and this is another part of the hypocrisy of abuse in the Kingdom Hall and the misogynistic, sexist undertones. This woman, she was in an abusive marriage, And her husband was an alcoholic. He was not a witness. He used to beat her children. And one time he came to the Kingdom Hall and he was beating her up outside the Kingdom Hall. No one called the cops. And I remember seeing it. And I remember talking to my brother about it. And I was like, I really wanted to call the police. And the brothers were like, they're going to handle it. And let me tell you, finally, this woman got up enough courage to leave her husband. And you know what the brothers told her? If she didn't try and work it out, that they were going to disfellowship her. I, all the times that I saw the physical violence, I wish that I had done more. I wish that I had, even at 13, 14, I wish that I had called the police and that I had let them know what was going on. I remember as I got older, I let them tell me that the brothers would handle it. And now when I see all of the scandals and learned about things that were happening in my own family, the very first thing that every witness person should do is get in contact with the authorities and tell the brothers after. There has to be a moratorium on sexual and physical violence in the organization. It's out of control. And I'm just sorry that I never reported it. Number 3, condemning someone who called the JW religion a cult. This is an interesting story. My brother and I were going out in field service, and I never forget we came to a door. And this was the first time that someone had ever said that the Jehovah Witness religion was a cult. And I know sometimes Jehovah Witness people are like, it's not a cult, it's a religion, it's God's only religion. Here's the thing. First of all, Jehovah is not the Watchtower and Tract Society. They are two different things. There is Jehovah the God, who's not a religion. And then there is the Watchtower and Tract Society, which is a religion that they're trying to interpret God. And the Watchtower and Tract and Bible Society, I'm going to help you out, is a publishing empire. So those are two separate things. And what happens is that they're controlling information for their members. So when you get the book, the Bible for all of cults, and again, I'm just leaving stuff out there for people to Google and do their own research, you will find there are all of the characteristics of a cult is found in the Jehovah Witness religion. But when I was young and it was all I knew, again, I'm a 3rd generation Jehovah Witness, and we were teenagers. We went to a door and someone said, you guys are in a cult, and I am very upset that they have young teenagers out here knocking on doors. And me and my brother looked at her like, are you kidding me? A cult? No. We've been doing this from the beginning of time. And that's another thing. It's amazing to me how this cult has twisted things. You actually have people in this belief system that think that the people that they are studying were actually Jehovah Witnesses. They weren't Jehovah Witnesses. The Bible is based on a Jewish history. They weren't Jehovah Witnesses, okay? And Jehovah Witnesses was created by someone with the last name of Russell. And Russell studied a lot of things. Number 1, he was a Mason. Number 2, he was responding also to a movement that was the Adventist movement. So when you learn about, it was one imperfect man that looked at a whole bunch of different beliefs and picked and chose which ones he wanted to bring together for his own belief. Anyone before that time, they were not a Jehovah Witness. The people that you're studying in the Bible were not Jehovah Witnesses. So again, all that stuff that they're telling you is so that they can try and show a lineage. But that's arbitrary and it's not true. And all you have to do is, again, take that water out of a cup, pour it into a pitcher, and find out for yourself and see if it stands up to examination. That's all I'm saying. But when we talked to that woman, we like really knew, we weren't disrespectful, but we were just saying all this stuff. But I never forget her like really calmly looking at us. She never got upset. She just said a few things, but we didn't even know what she was talking about. But I never forget just feeling like this woman is crazy. She's absolutely crazy for calling a Jehovah's Witness a cult. So it's really funny. I love the Scientology series. I wish someone would do it for the Jehovah's Witnesses because I think it would be phenomenal. But I never forget when she was talking about the first time that someone said that Scientology was a cult. She's like, if you tell anybody in Scientology that they're in a cult, they'll look at you like you're absolutely crazy. And that's the same thing for Jehovah's Witnesses. If someone tells you that you're in a cult and you're deep in it, you're going to look at them like they're absolutely crazy. And I just hated that I was one of them at one time. I regret about that. But it's a wonderful lesson for me because it made me actually go out there and do more research. And I'm so glad that I did. Number 2, not voting. Now, this one isn't specifically about when I was a Jehovah's Witness because if you heard any of my other videos, you'll know that I left this cult when I was 17 years old. But one of the things that was difficult for me was voting and getting involved in politics and getting involved in anything that had to do with my life around me in terms of, just being involved in the things that you need to be involved in, the school board, not necessarily school board, but just getting involved in where you live and getting involved in what's going on around you. So the Jehovah's Witnesses tell you not to be a part of the world. And they tell you not to vote and all of that. And I think it's a mistake because if they're going to tell you not to be a part of the world, then you need to actually not be in it. Meaning they need to find a place for all Jehovah's Witnesses to go, and then you won't have to deal with this, community, society at large, whatever. But as long as you're living in the society and you're actually paying taxes and you want to reap the benefits of being in a country, then you need to vote because everything that happens affects you. So, again, that was another thing that I felt was arbitrary and I didn't agree with it. And it's my number 2 regret. I wish that I had dropped some of the ideology from being in the Jehovah's Witness cult and got right into registering to vote. It is very important. It's very important for you to be involved in things that are going to directly affect you. And that's the other part of it. If you're living in the United States or anywhere else and you are an active member of your community, then you have to know that what you do and how you vote and who represents you has a direct effect on your life. You can't just throw your hands up and think that it's whatever happens. That's ridiculous. No, it's up to the members of society to create the world that they want. And that goes back to civil rights. That goes back to human rights. It's not like you sit there and you don't get involved. No, you need to get involved because it affects you. Okay, and number 1, number 1 is one of those things that it's one of those situations where I'm glad that I have a YouTube video to kind of make peace with something that I did when I was young. And I talk about it with my partner all the time. Not all the time, but I mention it as one of the things that happens when you're mind controlled. So I've talked about this in another video of some of the mind control techniques that they do in the Kingdom Hall. One of it is the Demonology. One of it is the fear tactics. They're always talking about demons. They're always talking about Armageddon. And these are all things to condition your mind. So my brother and I, we used to spend about 2 weeks with our grandparents. So we spent 2 weeks with my paternal grandparents and 2 weeks with my maternal grandparents. So we were spending 2 weeks with my paternal grandparents. And we had went to a meeting on Sunday. And at that meeting, the brother was saying all this stuff. He was talking about books and records and music. And he had actually brought some records, some lyrics from some of the popular records. And he was reading some of them, as part of his talk. And he was talking about how they were references to immorality and references to, invoking demons into the household. So again, we're listening. We're kids. We were actually taught to take notes. So about 2 or 3 days later, my grandmother and my grandfather went to the market. And we were old enough that we could be left by ourselves. So it was my brother and I believe my cousin. We were in my grandparents' house, and I think we were about 11 or 12. And my grandmother and grandfather had this huge record collection. They loved music. I'm talking Marvin Gaye, I'm talking, James Brown, The Temptations, Motown. They loved it. They had it all. Curtis Mayfield. I just remember all of these, Dionne Warwick. I'm talking all the good music, all the good R&B music from back in the day. They also loved jazz and blues. They had Nina Simone. They had, just so many, B.B. King, all these different musicians. My brother and I thought about the talk that we had, and we decided that we were going to go through Grandmom and Grandpop's record collection. And we were going to help them by cleansing them of all of the evil, immoral, demon-possessed lyrics. So my grandparents were gone for about 2 hours. My brother and I, we would look through the lyrics on the back of the record, and when we saw something that the brother had talked about, we would break the record. By the time we were done, we had destroyed probably the majority of my grandmother's records. I never forget when my grandparents came home, and my grandmother looked at us, and she was horrified. And she said, "What have you done?" And we explained. We talked about, what the brothers had said, and, how we were cleansing the house of all the demons and immorality and immoral lyrics. And, and my grandmother was like, I remember her shaking her head, but she had tears coming down her face, and she had to leave the room. And my grandfather was like, "It's okay. It's okay." But even here, sitting here now, so many years later, all my grandparents is deceased, but I still get heartbroken over us doing that. And that's one of the things that people don't think about when they talk about Armageddon, when they do all this stuff. It damages the children, and it makes us do things that we wouldn't normally do. And I can't take that back. Those records were invaluable. We didn't do it because we were trying to hurt my grandmother. We were doing it because we were mind controlled. We were told that this music was immoral, it invoked demons, and we took all of that to heart and went out and destroyed my grandmother's record collection. And that's my number one regret. And I feel better. I feel, like I made peace. My grandmother's never held it against me. It's one of those things. I mean, it was her collection even more so than my grandfather's. This was my grandmother's specific collection of records. She loved music. And my number one regret. I thank you guys for listening to me. I think that, like I said, giving these videos, I'm talking about some of my experiences of being a JW. It's cathartic for me. But more importantly, I hope that me sharing what I experienced talks to other people that are out there that may have experienced something similar, that may be questioning things. Just knowing that you're not alone, I think it helps. It helps me, and if I've helped someone, I think I know that I have done something right, and that's what it's all about. So stay tuned for my next video. Thank you so much for listening. If you have comments or suggestions on things that you'd like me to talk about, please leave a comment. Have a great day.